All right, everybody. Welcome back to Capitalize on Retirement. Joined here today with Brandon, my brother, and Tom Siomades. Tom is chief economist for a $40 billion firm that we partner with, AE Wealth Management. And what he does is he translates complex financial topics into simple, relatable terms. So today we're going to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I'm sure you guys have all heard about that recently,
Just a couple
right?
times.
We've all heard about that. It was passed on July 4th, 2025, and we're not here to debate whether it's beautiful or not. I think we can all agree that it is big. Does anybody know how many pages it is?
Was it like 900? Something
Almost
like that?
900, yeah.
Yeah, a little less than that. It's actually 587, but it's a
Okay.
massive bill, so we're not going to debate.
But it reads like 900.
It reads like
That's what
900. You read the
feels
whole thing?
No.
All right, so let's dig in. So I got a couple questions we'll go through today. So just kind of you guys want to talk about a brief overview of this bill and kind of the importance or significance of it?
Yeah, so there were a lot of changes, and we'll kind of go through some of those today. But one of the big changes, I would say, was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did not expire. And so it was supposed to expire at the end of 2025. That was extended, and now that is made permanent. So for all of us and a lot of our listeners, that means typically lower tax rates are extended for a longer period of time. And we know how that permanent word is, right? They say they're permanent, but that's just until another administration gets in office, in my opinion. So it will be hard to change, but I hate when they say permanent.
Yeah, I don't necessarily take it as permanent. It's more indefinite. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, you're going to have periods when and you kind of look at it in perspective, right? I mean, the last time you had significant tax reform was in the 80s with the Reagan stuff, right? Trump made an attempt first term. It was horsed through, but it was, like Brandon said, not permanent. And that was a big dark cloud that was kind of hanging over, the economy. And at the end of the day, you're going to still have to have, I mean, as much as a no-brainer as it was that you didn't want tax rates to go up, think about how difficult it was. Like they had to bring in J.D. Vance to break a tie, and it was like all this horse trading and arm twisting. So although it is sort of ingrained, yes, there is a possibility that it changes. But at the end of the day, you need a lot of political muscle. And you know how Washington is. I mean, it's like, nobody can agree on daylight savings time. Right?
Yeah.
Right? And so you expect these guys. So I think it'll be with us for a while. At the end of the day, though, I think there was a lot of things in the bill that because it was so imperative that the tax rate stayed, I think the bigger debate was with a lot of people was all the additional stuff that got packed up. Like no one was fighting the taxes going up, but everyone was fighting all the underlying stuff, and that was just being piled on because it's the same old thing in Washington. Like pork barreling and self-interest and special interest people, yada yada yada, and that's where I think it left a sour taste in the mouths of a lot of people.
Yep. Anytime you're doing something like this, they're always kind of throwing stuff in, and we all know it's tough for Congress to agree. One of the other questions I want to go through, this is specific to tax policies. Like, let's talk about the specific tax rate extensions, right? We know that they are indefinite or they're calling them permanent, but I believe personally that almost every American stands to benefit from this, and I don't know anybody who was kind of looking forward to higher tax rates. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit before, right? Listen, I think people are very selective about how they view these things. Because I remember the first time the taxes came around, people were complaining they weren't getting as much of a refund. Okay, well, you're getting more in your paycheck, right? And of course, that logic would dictate that you would get less of a refund because you're getting your money sooner, more frequently. I think at the end of the day, I don't think anyone disagrees with wanting to pay more taxes. I mean, you're certainly welcome to. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities on your tax forms to check a box and send in a check, but I don't think anybody wants to do that. But, it did improve. I mean, by every objective measure, it did improve people's, tax take home or keep money, right? Or, take home money. I think you're going to find people just, they don't like necessarily the messenger oftentimes in this particular case.
Yeah.
That they're really willing to just forego on being objective on the actual message.
I agree.
So.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, and I can kind of pivot on that, Tom. Like, I think when I look at what is beneficial to Americans, well, we all want to pay less in taxes. And so we're putting that money to good use, though, by spending more. The economy keeps growing. So I think if we could kind of pivot to, well, Tom, how do you feel about what are we going to do with this extra money that we have laying around? If we spend it, does that increase economic activity? And how does that actually help benefit some of the, maybe people are saying we're increasing the deficit and we're increasing the debt that we have because of this. Well, how could that potentially take care of some of that deficit and the debt that we're adding?
Right. So what's interesting about it is, first and foremost, money that you don't have to spend, that you give to the government, definitely takes away from your ability to live your life how you prefer, right? I mean, it's just less money. Your standard of living goes down because you have less money to spend on the things you want because someone else is spending your money for you. So that's one. The other aspect of it is, and this is the part where there's a lot of debate based on whether you're a half glass full, half glass empty type person. The theory is that if you have more money for yourself, you will go out and you will spend it on goods and services, right? That'll stimulate economic activity. The economy will grow. And the analogy I use oftentimes is the debt, right, for example, is huge and it needs to be serviced, right? And it's kind of hard at this point, but as you grow the economy and make more money, right, it becomes a lesser burden, right? And most people would, the way I'd look at it is think about the first house you bought. Okay, that mortgage, when it first came due, the first few months was like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this, right? But then as the years went on, you made more money at work. Your personal economy grew, right? And as a result of that, that payment was less onerous, right? Okay, there's a caveat there, right? Because I don't think the government is like, they're not going to just leave that payment alone, right? So that $37 trillion that we have in debt right now, if they start seeing the economy growing and tax revenue coming in, their first priority isn't, let me pay down the debt, right? Their first priority is going to be like, let me see how much more money I can spend because the economy can bear it. So that's a little bit of a nuance there. But I think ultimately the economy will grow because people will spend more money, and hopefully that makes the debt more manageable, and hopefully there is some priority given to paying it down, because that's another one that drags on your standard of living, because the government is out there competing for interest rates, and they don't really care how much they pay for interest rates. It's not them, right? So, but then whatever they pay becomes the standard, and the rest of us have to deal with it. So, good and bad. You just hope that there's discipline. And that's a tough one I think for the government to handle. Yeah, discipline about spending.
Definitely.
I agree. And businesses spend money to grow through debt all the time. So I mean, it's a pretty common thing what's happening. The other thing is, in my opinion, taxes are on sale right now, right? And we know that, and it's an opportunity to take advantage of. I've heard that they're calling for $2.8 trillion added to the deficit after this, but we'll see. That's the one piece of the bill with the brackets being extended permanently that does impact everyone here. A couple other little nuances of the bill that I want to tie in. Let's talk about the Trump accounts and how they might impact family savings for education. So these are set. There's not a ton of information out here on this, but these are set to be released in 2026. Brandon, you kind of want to hit a little bit on the Trump accounts?
Yeah, so it's kind of a new tax advantaged account. So for every child born between December 31st, 2024 and January 1st, 2029, will get $1,000 into an account. This account will have to be invested into index funds, and it essentially grows tax deferred. Now, they can access the money at 18, but what these accounts are typically going to be used for is almost like a retirement account. $1,000 invested over a 60 or a 65-year period until that child actually retires, that's going to be worth a whole lot of money down the road. And so, the goal is, how can we set up a retirement fund for these children when they're really young and let that money continue to grow and compound in the market? And I think this is one of the best things about the bill. I think it can be very powerful.
No, I agree. I mean, I'll throw the conspiracy theorist question to you, Tom, but I've read that this is kind of our first step in privatizing Social Security. You're only investing in index funds, things like that. So instead of having a Social Security trust fund, we're going to have these investment accounts. So that, again, conspiracy theorists, but what is your take on
I
that?
could see a path to that through there, but again, I view this as more of an enhancement for people, because I think these type of accounts would be more useful to people who only get Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you got a job and you're working where you're working and you have access to a 401k account, you're going to take advantage of it if you're being responsible. A caveat: the only people that are probably less disciplined than the government is probably people that are going to get these $1,000 accounts, because you were out there throwing out 60, 70 years, and I guarantee you that the minute a lot of these people turn 18, they're going to cash it in, and they're going to be very happy, but very short-sighted, right? So I suppose it could be a path towards some form of privatization, but we're also in the business, so it's I welcome it because I'm knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. People out there that are not, it's very possible that perhaps it might be detrimental to them to actually have a privatized account.
Yeah.
But then but these are the same people that say, well, I don't know anything about investing, and I had my money invested in my 401k in a money market fund for 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, whose fault was that you didn't take the time or seek out the help to educate you, right? And so there's always going to be that. There's always going to be the people that are going to say, well, there's always something nefarious going on. But I'm also of the belief that you need to have personal accountability in what you're doing, and I mean, you take care of your health, you take care of your family. You should take the time and the knowledge to take care of your finances and not expect it to be done by the government or anybody else.
I agree, and that kind of goes back to what Brandon said, right? Compounding interest over a long period of time will accumulate to a lot of money. So, if we are withdrawing these at 18, that could be an issue.
Maybe you don't tell the kid.
Just
right. They get the money, you just don't tell them anything, right?
My daughter has uniform transfer to minor account. We don't tell her. She's not going to know.
They wake up, then on your deathbed, you're like, hey, by the way, you got some money here.
Yep.
I just want to hit a couple of things here, because I know we kind of, a couple of things that really stood out to me. Number one, the standard deduction, and then there's something called the bonus deduction for seniors that I really want to hit on. So the standard deduction increased to $15,750 for an individual and $31,500 for a married couple. So that will be effective in 2025. If you are over age 65, and there's a couple nuances here, you have to have under $150,000 of total income. You would get an extra $6,000 deduction on top of the $15,750 or $31,500 for each person. So if you're a married couple, it could be up to $12,000 in addition to the regular standard deduction. So I don't know if you guys want to kind of touch on this, but we had so many questions around Social Security.
It's not permanent, though, right?
It's not permanent. No.
So there's a narrower window, so it's
Correct.
not an ongoing thing.
Correct.
2025 through 2028.
Yeah, it's only a few years. And so the misconception was that Social Security is no longer taxed. And I know this will help. If you're under those income limits, it could help with some of that tax on Social Security, but it's not that Social Security is not taxable anymore. So that was a big misconception with the bill.
Yeah, so they're not bringing Social Security taxation down to 0%, but they've added a increased deduction for anybody married filing jointly under $150,000, single filer $75,000. Basically, that deduction went from $33,200 to now, if you're under $150,000, add another $12,000 to that. So, I mean, it is a tax savings for most Americans. It's an opportunity that we can take advantage of through proper tax planning, but definitely not permanent, but definitely something that you should be aware of.
I would definitely, and I would highlight that, right? The fact that it's not permanent, it may be a really good opportunity to just, set some money aside, stay under that limit, and use some of that. If you need more than that, use some of that money you've set aside that isn't going to be considered income, right? And take advantage of it for as long as it lasts, right? I mean,
right.
the pressure and the process in Washington is always going to be to try to find more ways to get money out of us, right? So if we could play that game via planning, and this is one of those things, again, that we talked about, people who aren't really taking care of their financial well-being. This is another example of where if you have the right folks working with you and you can actually plan to take advantage of this, because that's real money that you're potentially leaving on the table. It's an opportunity cost versus, an actual cost to you, but if you don't benefit from it, then it's really not a benefit to you.
No, and I know Brandon's going to go through an example of the tax savings here in a minute, but one thing that I've noticed, because you mentioned this, by working with the proper people, we have 2 CPAs on our team. Beginning of the year, we set up retirement account withholdings for the families that we serve. When we set those up, it was under the previous tax code. And what we're seeing now with this increased deduction is that people have overpaid in, right, based on their current filing status. So what we've been able to do is do Roth conversions, and we're just using the money that's already been withheld to convert money over to a Roth. So I mean, it's been beneficial in certain cases.
Yeah, and just staying under those limits. Like, we do a lot of Roth conversions, but like you said, Tom, maybe it's, hey, instead of doing a $100,000 Roth conversion this year, let's kind of limit that and try to stay under certain limits. Let's save the taxes now. So that's why tax planning is so important. It's based on everybody's situation.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
So I do have an example here. So we ran an analysis just based on, I wanted to see what would somebody actually save in taxes. And I ran this as a married couple, and we ran $120,000 of total income between the couple. After the standard deduction and after the bonus deduction, as of right now, they would pay about $6,500 in taxes at the end of the year. Now, that's based on the current tax code that was just passed. With the old tax code, before this new bill was passed, for the same amount of income, they would be at about $8,100 of total tax. So, that's a $1,600 tax savings with that bonus deduction put in there. So, I mean, that's real money for a lot of Americans.
That's on $120,000. I mean, what's the effective rate? $120,000 of income, they're paying, what is that? 6.5 cents per dollar earned. I mean, that's not a bad deal.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so again, it harkens back to make sure you have the right people around you helping you, and making sure you're planning and taking advantage of every opportunity. I mean, look, I said it was 900, you said it was 500, whatever. I mean, your eyes will bleed reading the thing, right? So, there's a lot of stuff in there that, you need to have people that know what's going on. And I think a lot of people just, they hear the blah, 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 and then they listen to the talking heads who basically give them their perspective on everyone's got an opinion, right? And if you don't have the facts for yourself and you're just guided by people's opinions, you're probably either get, frozen and not do anything, or make a completely hideous mistake, and then you're going to be scratching your head wondering, like, where was that bus I just got hit by, right? So that's the challenge, right? The challenge is being proactive, again, and not necessarily coming in like, the commercials where they have the drugs where, they ask your doctor about. Well, you don't come in to you guys and shove a piece of paper and says, I want to know about that. No, it's like you say, hey, I know there's a tax bill. I think I can benefit. Can you help me find the ways to do it? That's the way to approach it versus, I want to take advantage of that $6,000. You may not be eligible for that $6,000 deduction for the Social Security, but there may be other things that could possibly help you, especially when it comes to the tax. Like, one of the things we didn't talk about was, that whole, I know real estate rates can be pretty high here in PA, right? And I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but, that SALT deduction is going to be, but that's also temporary. So you got to make sure you're on top of all of these things that are not going to necessarily stay.
The SALT deduction went from $10,000 to $40,000, but it's only effective through 2029. So that's a big one. And SALT and state and local tax deduction. So that's a huge one. There's a couple other little nuances, like no tax on tips, overtime, different things like that. Again, temporary. You had to have tips from the previous year too, so you can't, we can't just change our income to tips and not pay taxes. How do you guys feel about the auto loan interest deduction?
That's old school.
Yeah.
Because I remember the first car loan I had that you could deduct the interest on that, and then that went away for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, I think, look, you're trying to encourage economic activity here.
Yeah.
And it's only for American cars, right?
Yeah, assembled in the
yeah,
U.S.
so, again, what's assembled in the U.S.? 51%?
I think final production.
99%?
They said final production.
I mean, do they stick a little USA sticker on the back and call it good? But but still, it will improve, hopefully, car sales. I mean, you guys know what it's like buying a car. I mean, it's a very personal decision, right?
Yep.
You're not going to just buy some lemon just because it's built in the U.S.
Right.
and not buy a Porsche if you can, right? But I mean, but all things considered, minivan from, Volkswagen versus a minivan from Chrysler. You need the thing, right? And if you benefit a little bit from it,
right?
But again, that's like super old school. That's
Yeah.
that's a blast from the past.
There's also bonus depreciation on real estate for real estate investors, things like that. I mean, do you guys feel like this will? I know they're saying, and I mentioned this earlier, that the debt will increase by $2.8 trillion by 2034. Do you guys feel that could potentially happen? Is it just too big of an unknown? I mean, what's the take on that?
What was the year they said?
2034.
Okay, so that's like 10 years from now. No, I don't. I think those are things that are thrown around like boogeyman arguments. I think at the end of the day, you need to start paying down the debt some way, somehow. There was. I mean, look at who would have thought? Okay, if you look at the money that got spent over the pandemic years, was that in the 2015 estimate for the deficit? And now, 10 years later, where are we, right?
Yeah.
So my point is you don't know what's coming down the pike. I mean, unfortunately, what's coming down the pike is probably going to be more of a bad thing. Then it's not like they're going to say, well, 10 years from now, the deficit's going to go from 37 trillion to 20. That would be a good thing.
Right.
Now, I know there's been talk about using some of the money that's been collected from tariffs and things like that to, but then in the same breath, they talk about paying down the debt with the tariffs, and then they say, well, I want to give every American a bonus. So that's the push and pull of the politician, right? I mean, you're basically a middleman, right? You're trying to make some people happy at the expense of someone else, and you're trying to play that game. So I don't believe any of these, these projections that 10 years out. I mean, they're lucky if they get a year out.
They're usually not right.
No,
with the projections.
Usually in a wrong way, right? I mean,
right.
So you wonder, okay, well, this is a nice. Maybe Doge should have sniffed around that place.
Yeah, right.
Because you're paying all these guys to be wrong, right?
Well, that's kind of a good point, Tom. I know this is kind of off track of the one big beautiful bill, but you mentioned tariffs, and we get this question almost every day as to, hey, costs of things in the U.S. are going to go up because of the tariffs. How do you feel about that, and what's kind of your take on it?
So on the tariff front, okay, the reason you get inflation is because there's more money chasing fewer goods. That's the classic definition, right? The economic school, Econ 101 definition. The way I look at tariffs is as follows, okay? If something foreign is tariff and you were used to paying $10 for it and now you're paying $20 for it, but you only had $100 to start with, okay? You got $80 to spend on all the other stuff you would have bought. If those prices go up, you just have less and less money. So you're not creating more money to just go chase after that higher price good. So if that happens, the pressure's put on the other items that you would have bought with $90, but you only have $80 for.
Yeah.
They're not going to go up. And then, again, it's foreign stuff. It's not U.S. stuff. So I think that said, you have to look at human nature, right? So, for example, if, say, coffee gets tariffed and there's somebody growing coffee in the U.S., if that international coffee is doubled, that guy might decide to raise his prices a little bit. That's just human nature, right? That's kind of like what capital is you put out what the market is willing to bear. But there's also the theory that if something goes up via cost or tariff, you'll find an alternative good. So maybe you don't drink coffee, you drink tea, right? Or if you really want to buy that coffee bad enough, you're going to pay the extra and then cut back on other things. So it's a balancing mechanism. I don't think it's just because you announce a 30% tariff on China, everything in the U.S. goes up by 30%. That's
Right.
not how it works. And then the other aspect of it is all of these companies are trying to be competitive. You got really smart people trying to maintain the company's competitiveness and market share. I don't think their knee-jerk reaction is to just jack up prices, because they know people are not going to want to put up with that, and they're going to get a lot of flack and probably lose customers. So, and not to mention that interest rates are where they are right now. People are carrying a lot of debt around, so that's the last thing you need. So that's kind of where I am. I think it's targeted. I think at the end of the day, you look at the way it plays out. Some things will get more expensive, other things will get cheaper.
Yeah.
But the big thing that people miss is that it's money in the system, and if we don't print more money like the Fed did during the pandemic, the odds of you having let's put it this way: if I gave you $200 where you had $100 before, you're going to spend it a little bit more freely, right? And that's kind of what happened. And that's what drove that 9% inflation across the board. In this case, you still have a limited amount of money, and if you're going to choose to pay, again, the choice is not you don't have a choice, you're going to choose to pay more for something.
Right.
That leaves you, by definition, less to pay for other things, and all those guys that you would buy those other things from are actively competing to try to get part of that remaining money that you have left.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't behoove them to jack up prices.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
No.
I agree.
I agree too. We'll kind of tie this off, but let's talk about, Brandon, we talk about this all the time, having a proactive tax plan. And let's talk about why that's so important. I'll kind of hit this. Like, one thing we know what rates are. And we also know that taxes are inevitable, right? We're going to pay them. So it's not a matter of if we're going to pay them, it's a matter of when. So let's talk about why having that coordinated approach is so important.
Yeah, so, having a tax plan, in my opinion, us as advisors, we talk about the markets, we talk about investments. What I've realized is having an actual tax plan could literally save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes in some circumstances. And so if you're not looking at your IRAs and tax-deferred accounts and trying to figure out ways to pay less on that money, the government's playing chess, and they're probably going to get more out of that account than you would like them to. And so having a tax plan and coordinating that with your CPA and your advisor, in my opinion, is very important. And that's why having our accountants on staff and really working with them, with our clients, to save some tax dollars, I think it's ultra important.
Yeah, I mean, taxes are a big needle mover, and it's kind of agnostic of who writes the check. It's either you or your heirs. So we want to make sure we are, being appropriate there. And one question we ask in our workshops all the time is, we ask people when we're teaching workshops on taxes is who here thinks taxes are going down in the future. And it's funny because no hands ever go up. So we don't necessarily think they're going to go down. What's your take on that, Tom?
So I go back to the old adage, it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? So you have to be mindful of all the different tricks and trades and gimmicks. It sounds trivial, or it sounds like I'm being flippant, but you have to take advantage of everything. If we really truly wanted to have simplistic taxes on here, you can get rid of all the CPAs and you can get rid of all the IRSs and all that. And just we could all get in a room and argue and bare knuckle brawl and decide what a fair share is, and let's all decide it's 20%.
Yeah.
And you would pay 20%, no deductions, no this, no that, no anything. Right? We were super simple.
Make it a
but
lot
there's
easier.
a reason why there's thousands and thousands of pages of tax law out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are ways that people with means and access can figure out a way to minimize that.
Right.
So that's my argument for it's I would say if you had to break down a pie between 100% of investment planning and tax planning, I'd go more like 55-45.
Yeah.
Or even 60, maybe 60-40.
Yep.
But it's almost as important, if not, for some people, the more important thing. Because there's a lot of people that already made money,
Yeah.
right, and have made the investment, have had the investment successes, if you will, but now tax planning, it's how do you keep those successes? Because there's nothing more deflating than saying, making $500,000 in investment gains, and then when you want your money, you walk out with $250.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so, we have a lot of clients who have put money into their 401ks for a long time, It's grown over time, and now it's a large balance. Every time they take money out of that account, it's ordinary income. And as that ordinary income goes up over time with required minimum distributions and all these different things, your income affects Social Security and how that's taxed. The more income you have, the more you pay on Social Security tax. It affects your Medicare premiums. More income you have, more Medicare. And it also affects your capital gains. And so people aren't looking at these things. So having, Roth IRAs and different accounts, it's very important. That will not affect some of those different taxes that we see.
I think one of the problems, though, for people is they see that you want to do a Roth conversion. It's just such a bite, it's just so painful to do it.
Yeah.
But it's so much better for the long run, right?
Yep.
Right.
And yet, I think when people see that, it's like, well, you're going to have to convert this 401k. And they see how much it is initially, and you're like, I don't want to pay that.
Right.
Right? And so, in a perfect world, you would be able to convert your 401k that you took all the risk on your entire working life. You did.
Right.
The government wasn't there. They didn't share in that risk, right? All they did was just let your money grow tax deferred. Okay. But then at the end of the day, they're the first one in line ahead of everybody, and they elbow you out of the way. It would be awesome. I mean, I wish that would have been really beautiful if they had said, listen, you could take you could do a tax-free Roth conversion. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I doubt the government will ever go for something like that.
Right.
But that's the I think the biggest hurdle to get your mind around the fact that I've got $500,000. I mean, what's their typical rate for it's ordinary income for Roth conversion, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
22, 24.
Okay, so you're going to lose a quarter of that.
Yeah.
But everything after that you make, you won't ever pay taxes on, and then you could give it to your kids and your heirs, and they'll never have to pay taxes on it when they get it. So,
I think that's, tax planning, and, you mentioned this with the pie chart example. Tax planning is one of the most underserved areas, and there's multiple ways to pay the tax bill. You could withhold, but I think having that tax plan, that future outlook of what you will spend over your lifetime taxation versus this year, that's why you have to have that before you go make these decisions. We have people come in and they'll say, I'm doing X amount of dollars in Roth conversions a year, and it's, well, why? Or, hey, I haven't done anything, I haven't thought about that, and that's okay too, but you have to have that plan in place.
Yeah.
Guys, to wrap this up, just final thoughts. Summarize kind of the key takeaways of this bill, what people should be aware of, what they should be looking out for, and how they can help themselves and their families going forward.
Yeah, so I will say, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is now extended and it's technically permanent. So there's a lot of tax planning to be done right now. Tax planning is maybe sometimes we don't do anything. We just sit on our hands, and sometimes it's, hey, we have to make major decisions and pay some taxes now so that money's maybe tax-free down the road. So there's a lot of changes. I think you need to consult with someone who understands it and see if there's any tax savings, right? We have a ton of clients that come in and their main concern is taxes. And so just looking at that, having a plan for it, I think that's super powerful.
I think, listen, I 100% with what you're saying, but I would also look at it as a multi-step, multi-year, ongoing process, right? To think about what you've been doing, right? It's like a garden, right? You've been growing all these things in the garden your entire working life. Now it's time to weed it and harvest, right? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it can't just be like, well, I'm just going to come in once a year, we'll have an annual meeting, and then I'm going to sit down with my accounting and fill out my taxes. No, it has to be a multi-year plan with it's like, and I hate to use some of these analogies, but like, you got to get mean, right? You got to like be nasty, because the government's going to take your money from you, right?
Yeah,
so you got to be just as nasty. You any competitive sport, and kind of look at it that way, right? It's like you got to be nastier than the other guy, and you should use every trick in the book to try to win the game. And to me, that isn't just hey, how you doing? Let's get together next January kind of baloney. No, this is like, I want to move this ball forward, and I want to run up the score, and I want to squeeze out every single dollar I can for me, my retirement, my heirs, my family, right? And because that's really that's why we're on this planet for. Like, I don't really care if somebody gets heated sidewalks in Vermont. Don't really care, right? So, but that's what the government's going to do with it, because
Yeah.
when we started the conversation by talking about the fact, early on, we talked about, what happens when you have more in your pocket than the government.
Right.
You're basically deferring your well-being and giving money to the government who's spending it on what they think is important. And I would argue, if you were to look at what the government spends money on, are those the same priorities that you have? I would say no, because the government's priority isn't you, your family, right? Your comfort. No.
Yeah.
The government is going to do what the government's going to do. So
Right.
to me, that's why you have to, it's got to be multi-year, and get your kids involved. All right, if you've got money that you're planning on passing on, like, you see these kids walking around with their phones in their face, and it's like, get off the screen, sit down with dad or mom, and this is the plan. They need to understand the plan, because when you move on, that's the other thing, is like, they don't know what to do because they never had the planning explained to them, and weren't feeling like they were a part of it. So it's a lot easier to hand off when you've got a plan that's implemented.
100%.
And then I don't know if you guys do like trust estates and all that kind of, that stuff needs to get done too.
Yep.
That all needs to be all part of it.
Definitely.
Get in there and get a family trust and all the things that, wealthy people do, It's like everyone complains about wealthy people. Well, you know what? Those things can help you too. That's why they stay
They're
wealthy.
keeping more money in their pocket than giving to the government, so that's the goal.
Totally agree with that. When you said the garden analogy, Brandon has a garden right now, so.
That's it. Get out there.
That's it.
You got like cucumbers that are like, they look like
I got them
elongated
all. I've
watermelons.
been canning all kind of stuff, so I got
right.
hundreds of jars of cucumbers.
I'm getting tomatoes and cucumbers all summer.
Candy coming out of your ears.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think that's it. Tom, we appreciate you coming. This was awesome. We're excited to be back and back to capitalize on retirement. So,
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
thank you.